Many of you know that my father passed away many, many years ago. I was 25 years old when my father was murdered, and his memory is alive today in my heart. I'm always so happy to see all the fathers stand up, and I use my imagination that my dad is standing there. You probably can't tell, but I was a daddy's girl. And the night before he was killed was Christmas Eve. The next day was Christmas Eve. And I was 25 years old, and he said, "Sit on my lap." Now, I hadn't sat on Daddy's lap in years. And he said, "I want to tell you something. You're special and you're going places. And I wish I could live to see it. But if I don't live to see it, remember one thing. You're nobody if you're not trying to help somebody." Little did my dad know that my name, Sandra, comes from the Greek name Alexander, which means helper of mankind. And so that night was a eulogy, because the next day he was killed. It was the last conversation I had with my dad. And it lasted all these years. The memories of that conversation catapulted me into where I am today. To give back something that I was gifted with, the ability to help somebody. That's why I'm a minister. When we stand here on this platform, Duke and I and Ian, we're already reading our own mail, as you've heard me say many times before. It's not me talking to you, it's me listening to you. You may not be saying anything with your mouths, but as Donna Johnson so wisely put it, you're in my holodeck, so I'm getting feedback already, or a replay of what's reflecting from me. So since I started with something a little sad, I think I'll go back and start with something a little funny and put you in a better mood. Every night, before she went to bed, her mother would have her get down on her knees and say her bedtime prayer. You probably said this prayer. "Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I should die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take." And then she'd go through all the litany of God bless mommy, God bless daddy, God bless my sister, God bless my brother. And then she would finally end as her mother taught her. But a little bit differently, with her own twist, she'd say, "And all girls." And so finally, her mother, after hearing this over and over again, said, "Honey, why do you end your prayer with all girls? That's not the way I taught it to you." She said, "Well, all the other prayers say all men." So, all girls. So I want to talk to you today about choosing. I didn't grow up with a father who taught me how to ride a bicycle, a father who spent quality time with me, teaching me the facts of life. I didn't grow up with a father who taught me how to dance. I didn't grow up with a father who taught me how to drive. Actually, when I was about 13, my father had had a little bit too much to drink at a family gathering, and he was weaving in and out of traffic. Luckily, back then, there was not a lot of traffic. And Daddy had once sat me on his lap and was showing me how to use the steering wheel, but I'd never really used the pedals. But I thought I could do it, and my mom was afraid to drive. And so I asked Daddy, could I get up in the front seat and help him drive? "Come on up here," he said. "Get on up here." So I get in the front seat, and I said, "Well, Daddy, can I sit in your lap?" "Come on over here." And he weaves the car over, and I get in his lap. And I said, "Daddy, if you'll push on the pedals, I can do the steering. That's my baby." And so he's pedaling, and I'm steering, and I've been driving ever since. At 13. Because when Mom would want to go to the grocery store, or she would want to go somewhere, I learned to drive very quickly. And so I would drive her all over Kansas City, Kansas, to the grocery stores and everywhere else she needed to go without a driver's license. Now, I had had a few lessons. My dad didn't teach me, but the father figure in my life was my big brother. My brother is 11 years older than I am. And he grew up with a father, the same father, in an abusive household with a lot of domestic abuse with my mom. And my brother's the only boy, and he's a junior, and he was determined that he was going to be different than our dad, so he joined the police force. He became a law enforcement officer for 32 years. He was so angry about the alcoholism and the abuse that he said the first time he arrested someone for drunk driving, He wanted to take his billy club out and just pummel him. And he realized he needed to heal himself. He needed to heal himself. So the three of us, my sister is 10 years older, grew up in a household where the father was present sometimes, but not active. So I've chosen in my life to pull out those good memories of my dad. He was a lot of fun. He told jokes like you wouldn't believe. When the 9 o'clock whistle blew at General Motors in Fairfax, everybody gathered around for his lunch because Mom cooked him a home-cooked meal for lunch every day. And then they wanted to hear the stories. He called them lies, the jokes. He was full of them. He was fun. He was a serious man. It took me years to realize all the things he had been through that led him to where he was. I'm amazed he made it. He drove ammunition trucks behind enemy lines in pitch black darkness during World War II. He saw many of his comrades' heads blown off. When all of a sudden someone either lit a cigarette or something and they had to leave their trucks on idle and jump into the trenches. This man saw a lot in his lifetime, and I didn't realize until I got grown that he was so affected by that. He never talked about it. Rumi says, out beyond the ideas of wrongdoing and right doing, there is a field. I'll meet you there. In the years since my father's death, I've found that field. And on a regular basis, I meet him there. I meet him there in my dreams. I meet him there in my imagination. I meet him there in my ministry. He taught me that all of us are children of God and that we all fall short. We all have our stories. We all have things that happen in our lives that maybe we had a good father who danced with us and taught us to drive and made sure we had everything we needed. We had the things we needed. Maybe you didn't have a father in your life. Maybe as a father, you think about the things you could have, would have, or should have done, but you didn't. Well, out beyond the field of wrongdoing and right doing, out beyond the field of wrongdoing and right doing, out beyond those ideas, there is a field. If your father is still living, meet him there. If that father figure, like my brother who taught me to drive, taught me to ride the bicycle, took the training wheels off my bike, gave me my first bike, because he wanted to be the father that, to me, that he didn't have in our dad. In Exodus, the 10th chapter, the 12th verse, we read, honor thy father and thy mother, so that your days will be long upon this land. A few months ago, maybe 2 months ago, Duke talked about the 10 Commandments, and he only talked about a few. And when he mentioned honor thy father and mother, he got some pushback. He got some feedback later on from people who did not have the kinds of childhoods that they would have imagined, you know, the Cinderella story. And what I have to say to you about that, if you recognize that in yourself, is life is a choice. We can choose what we focus on. We can choose what we allow ourselves to dwell on. We can choose to see the good. One thing my brother says to me often is, you always see the glass half full. But what he doesn't recognize is he's the reason I see the glass half full, because he stepped in. He stepped in at a young age to fill my glass when my father wasn't capable of doing that. How many of you are filling someone else's glass? How many of you have the opportunity to be the father, the mother, the guide, the wisdom teacher to someone? We all have that opportunity. I grew up watching Leave It to Beaver, and I would imagine, even though they didn't look at all like me, that I could have a family like that. And my 3 sons and Donna Reed, I wanted a family like that. But by looking at the glass half full, I realized I had what I needed to get me where I was going in life. Had my life been all a bed of roses, I probably wouldn't be here talking with you. Because I'm reading my own mail, I'm able to share that with you. My friends and neighbors had fathers who took them places and did things with them. My first real vacation, other than going back and forth down home to Louisiana and Arkansas in the treacherous heat of the summer, was my brother and his wife taking me to St. Louis to the zoo. So there's always a father to step in. Sometimes we don't recognize them. He gave me advice but not unless I asked for it. And that's a father. I remember one time I was going through a particularly difficult marriage, and my brother, who never gave advice unless asked for, was kind of tired of the bickering back and forth with my family, because I'd go back to my husband and then we'd break up, and I'd go back. And how many of you have ever been through that? I'm sure I'm not talking to myself. I'm not just reading my mail. I know I'm not. And finally, my brother, one day at a really heated discussion at the dinner table, said, "Come here." And he grabbed me by the arm and he took me outside and he says, "Look, the day you realize that you can't make chicken salad out of chicken other stuff, you will walk away." It was like E.F. Hutton, because my brother never gave advice to anyone unless they asked for it. And here he saw his sister struggling with something that he had the wisdom, and he shared that wisdom. And you know, that turned me around. I thought, no matter what anybody else said, they could quote scripture, they could show me, I could read stories and books. Nobody, no psychologist, nobody could have said what Grady said that day. And it clicked. And I was able to get out of a not so good situation. There's a story of a young man who ran restaurants, and he was so good at it. His name was Jerry. The story is told by a restaurateur who knew Jerry before he started into his own business. His name is Francis Baltazar Schwartz. Francis said every time he'd see Jerry, he'd say, "How are you doing, Jerry?" He'd say, "I'm so good. If I were any better, I'd be twins." He said everybody who ran into Jerry and said, "How are you doing?" got that same response. He couldn't figure out why Jerry was always so happy. He was so happy that whenever he would start a new restaurant, many of the people from the employees from the other restaurant would leave and go follow Jerry. Anybody who was having a bad day, all they had to do was have a conversation with Jerry, and it would lift them right up. You know anybody like that? Yeah, I do. I try to be that way, but it doesn't always work for me. It was all about Jerry's attitude. And so one day, Schwartz went over to Jerry and says, "Hey, man," he said, "there's no way you can be happy like this all the time. I mean, that's just not possible. How do you do that?" Jerry said, "Each morning, before I get out of bed, I say to myself, Jerry, you have two choices today. You can be in a good mood, or you can be in a bad mood." Jerry said, "I choose to be in a good mood." He said, "Each time something bad happens, I can choose to be a victim, or I can choose to learn from it. I choose to learn from it." He said, "When I hear other people belly aching about stuff, I can choose to accept their complaining, or I can point out the positive side of life, that the glass is half full, depending on how you look at it." So Schwartz said, "Yeah, right, that sounds good, Jerry, but I can't believe you're like this all the time." Jerry said, "Man, life is about choices. When you cut away all the junk," and we've all got a lot of junk, don't we? "Every situation is a choice. You choose how you react to situations. You choose how people will affect your mood. You choose to be in a good mood or a bad mood. The bottom line is, it's your choice how you live your life." Soon after that conversation, Schwartz lost touch with Jerry because he started a restaurant of his own, and then one day he heard that Jerry had an unfortunate circumstance. Unlike most days, he forgot to lock the back door of the restaurant when he was about to open that day, and two robbers came in and robbed him at gunpoint. Jerry lay on the floor bleeding from a shotgun. Because when his hands were trying to open the safe, one hand, he was so nervous, slipped off, and the nervous man holding the gun shot Jerry. It wasn't long before emergency equipment arrived and the EMTs came and they got him to the hospital. And Jerry was feeling pretty okay. He said, I've got a choice, you know. I can see the good in this. I'm going to survive. And then a big burly nurse said to him, are you allergic to anything? And the doctors were all getting ready and getting him prepped and putting the equipment around him and everything and hooking him up. And he saw fear in their eyes. And he said, oh my God, I have a choice. I got to change my attitude right now. So they said, are you allergic to anything, sir? He said, yes, bullets. He said, I want you to operate on me like I'm living, not like I'm dead. He could tell by the looks on their faces that they had already written him off. And thanks to the skill of that hospital, the nurses and the doctors, he lived, he survived. Schwartz went to visit him not long after that, and he asked him, how was he doing? And he smiled and gave his usual response, if I were any better, I'd be twins. Want to see my scars? Schwartz said, he asked him what had gone through his mind during the robbery. He said, first of all, I should have locked the back door. And then I knew I had to take some action. So I asked myself, Jerry, I said, do you have a choice? Do you want to live or do you want to die? And I wanted to live. So he said, life, my friend, is about choice. How you look at it makes all the difference in the world. Years ago, my brother-in-law, who was 18 at the time, moved from Maryland to Kansas City and looking for a job. He just graduated high school, and the only job he could get was a janitorial service. And so he would go to this job for a long time with a smile on his face, and then it got to be drudgery for an 18, 19-year-old to be doing cleaning buildings and so forth. So one day he came to Phil and I, and he said, I'm going to quit the job, and I'm going back to Maryland. And we said, why would you want to do that? He said, well, you know, surely there's something else I can do besides clean. I said, here's the deal. Life's about attitude, and every day you have a choice. You can go there with a big smile on your face and act like that's the only job in the world and clean and do things like you've never done it before, have an attitude that this is my building, I want my signature on everything I do. Or you can look at it like this is the end of the world, it's time to go, move on, and then you'll meet the same problem when you get back to Maryland. You'll have another job that you won't like. It's conquering it within you. And Terrence stayed. And this smile that he put on his face was so magnificent that people started coming to him saying, hey, how much are they paying you to do this? I want you to come work for me. And someone from Sprint hired Terrence, a VP. He was cleaning up the building and said, what's a nice young man like you doing in a place like this? I would love to have someone like you on my team. So Terrence was hired working for the VPs, setting up the conference rooms and cleaning up the conference rooms. And then one of them walked up to him and said, what's a nice young man like you doing in a place like this? Because Terrence wore this attitude. Once we had that talk, he changed his attitude. Every job was the best job in the world. It's all about choice. The glass was half full. Terrence stayed there for over 20 years. And he was in the last round of layoffs a couple of years ago. He loved his job, and it showed. No matter what they gave him to do, he did it with gusto. He realized that every day when he wakes up, he has a choice. He can choose to be in a good mood, or he can choose to be in a bad mood. He chose a good mood, and that good mood carried him throughout his career. You see, companies hire for attitude. They train for skill. You can't teach attitude. So you have a choice every single day. I put this on the front of your bulletin, and I hope you'll take it home. Choose to feel blessed. Choose to feel grateful. Choose to be excited. Choose to be thankful. Choose to be happy. This is your life. Choose wisely how you live it. You have a choice every single day, no matter what is going on in your life. You can be a ray of sunshine or you can be a stormy cloud. The choice is yours. Choose wisely. Why don't we take that thought into meditation?